Three Honolulu City police officers who are involved in the shooting and killing of 29-year-old Lindani Myeni will not face criminal charges. The South African man was shot dead on the 14th of April this year in the U.S. state of Hawaii. To talk more on this, we're joined by James Bickerton, the lawyer of Lindani's widow, Lindsay Myeni. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Certainly, these are startling developments. What have been the reasons given for these officers not facing serious crime here?
Well, it's very troubling. First thing I do have to mention is that we're the civil lawyers, and this doesn't really affect the case that we're bringing for the family against the city for civil liability. But it is important that all of the institutions of the city function properly, and we're troubled by the way this one was handled. The prosecutor issued a 65-page report. And not once in those 65 pages does he mention or refer to the fact that Lindani said twice, "Who are you? Who are you?" He made a statement publicly. He says, "Oh, they could see him and he could see them." But we have on video the officer who fired the first shot repeatedly saying to other officers, and it's recorded on his own body cam, repeatedly saying, "Oh, I couldn't see anything, I couldn't see him." And so we're puzzled by this, and there's another part to the prosecutor's analysis that is completely missing. It's not in there, and that is, every time that you're looking at a fight, that's what this was. There was a fight going on, and someone decided to end it with a gun. The real question is, who started that fight? And the prosecutor never looks at that question. He just says, "Oh, well, there was a fight, and they were afraid during the fight, so it was okay to shoot." But that's not the law. If you started the fight, you can't get the benefit of that law. So it was very important for him to analyze who really broke the law first. And Mr. Myeni was not moving. He was standing still, and he was commanded to lie on the ground at gunpoint by someone who obviously he didn't know who they were. And so that in itself is an assault. That first action by the officer is an assault. Is it legal? It's legal for a police officer to draw a gun and ask someone to lie down on the ground or do something else if the police officer states that he's a police officer and states his purpose. Those two things didn't happen here. So we have a very difficult time distinguishing between what the police officer did and the crime of kidnapping or terroristic threatening or unlawful restraint. Because if you or I pulled a gun on someone and told them to lie on the ground, we could be arrested for doing that. So it's only lawful for police officers to do it if they do it correctly.
It sounds to me, though, like then the prosecutor skipped through some main analysis here.
Well, he did, and I interviewed with some of the journalists from South Africa when the prosecutor first announced that he was going to look into it and suggested he would provide a, quote, independent review, which really wasn't independent because he didn't do his own interviews of witnesses or anything else. He just took the evidence that the police officers had collected and then did his own analysis of that evidence. But when he first announced, we were somewhat skeptical that we would be getting a real analysis. And the reason we said then still holds. The prosecutor's day job, his regular job when he's not making announcements about police shootings, is to prosecute the humdrum and not so humdrum cases that come his way every single day. Burglaries, thefts, murders, arson, kidnapping, drug deals, whatever they may be. He has to prosecute all of those every day, literally hundreds of cases at a time. And to do that, he needs the full cooperation and assistance of police officers. And, they're a unionized force, and it's very easy for a workforce like that to decide that, well, today's the day I'm taking vacation, or sorry, I couldn't get down to court today to testify in your case. So that kind of thing can happen to him. So he is not really someone who can be firm or stern with the police force when it's needed. He just isn't. And he had 2 police shootings in the space of 2 weeks. And I think what he did was he took the one that might be easier for him to win charges on and said, I'll prosecute that one. And this one is a little harder because it all happened very quickly. There was a fight involved, and it happened at night. And so he realizes that he could put on a case, but he might not win it. It wouldn't have as good a chance as winning the other case where the officer shot someone in the back of the head who was sitting in a stationary car. So he decided he would prosecute the first one and not prosecute the second one, and that way he can look good to both sides, if you will. Obviously not to the Myeni family, but to the people who are saying the police should be held accountable. They're pleased that he's prosecuting the first case. And to the people who say, you know, back the blue, police force, no matter what, to those people, they're happy that he's not pressing charges in the Myeni case.
So I know that you say that this will have no bearing on the civil case. Does it not touch it in one bit, you know, to say that then they're not going to face any criminal liability here? Does it not then have some kind of impact on the judge that will be presiding over the civil lawsuit?
No, I really don't think so, because it's very common. I mean, it's very rare for police to be prosecuted, and the fact that they're not criminally liable, every judge would know that that doesn't affect one way or the other the civil case. It's a completely different standard. More importantly, I think this civil case is not decided by a judge, it's decided by a jury. And so that is an important fact. And then there's another interesting fact, which is actually it's a small blessing. We've been very restricted in what evidence we could obtain because the prosecutor was looking at it. The judge in the case said, look, we're going to give the prosecutor 60 days, and in that time, we're not going to allow you to look at certain evidence because, you know, it might affect whatever criminal charge. I didn't really agree with that result, but we accepted it. Now that the prosecutor isn't going to be pressing any charges, it's going to be open book on discovery. We're going to be allowed to see everything. And we've already established some very key things. We got the body cam video after the shooting. We have hours of that, really, because there's at least 10 or 15 officers who turned on their body cam. You know, half the police force, it seems, arrived within 5 or 10 minutes after the shooting. Obviously, when there's a shooting involving an officer, lots of police come, and they all turn on their body cams, and they're all talking to each other. So there's a lot of video of the scene. There's video of the officers who did the shooting. There's video of them talking about it. All of this is going to come out, and there's going to be an ability to look at the personnel files of these two officers that we've named in the suit. We have to do more discovery to see if we should name the third one. The third one fired a taser, but didn't fire any bullets at Mr. Myeni. So, you know, that's not such a clear-cut case. Excuse the wind out here in Hawaii. It's getting a little windy today. But anyway, so that's a positive thing, that the absence of a criminal case clears the way for the civil case to move forward a lot more swiftly and more completely. I realize that's not great satisfaction to people who want to see the officers held accountable in a criminal court, but we have to work with the system that we have here. Our civil courts will hold the city and the officers accountable on a civil basis. And that is, go ahead. Pardon
me, as we wrap up our conversation, how did Lindsay feel about this latest development for, you know, that was taken by the prosecution? What was her reaction to this?
Well, she was disappointed, obviously, but she's a very, you know, I think she's more mature, really, even than her lawyers. She's a philosophical person. She understands that this is a long quest for justice. She understands that there are going to be moments when you're down and you have to remain strong. And so she has already picked up her spirits quite a bit, because the very next day, evidence came out that Mr. The prosecutor, who says, oh, the police officers could see him and he could see them. We have actual footage now that's out there. It's in today's newspaper, being discussed in the newspapers here in Hawaii, that the shooting officer says, I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see him. I couldn't see. So, you know, the attention that the case is getting still, and the cries from people who are criticizing the prosecutor because of the big gap in his analysis, I think make her feel, rightly so, that this isn't really over. This is going to continue in one forum or another, and in the end there will be justice. And she's looking for real change as well. And I think that that is something that can still be produced by this case. A good example of change would be the law that we think is already clear can be made much clearer, and say, look, at night, if you're going to stop people, you must use the words police. If it's nighttime, if it's dark, you have to do that. Some people are saying, well, you only have to do it if you're actually making an arrest, and there's a debate over that. We don't think that's true. We think if you draw your weapon and order someone on the ground, that's a restraint, and that is an arrest, even if you're not saying I arrest you, even if you don't know what crime has been committed. But people are arguing over it now, which is good, and that will make more dialogue, and then I think laws will change and strengthen from this. And of course, we do expect to get compensation for the family for this, which is going to be necessary because one of the two breadwinners is no longer there, and Lindsay has to raise 2 children by herself. So we still think that justice can be done, but it doesn't look like it's going to get done by this prosecutor.
A very hard situation, I tell you, for Lindsay. But certainly, as you say, that she's in high spirits and she's picking herself up, it's really heartwarming to hear. Thank you so much for your time. We certainly do appreciate it. And all wind and all, we appreciate the time, Mr. Bickerton. Thank you. That was James Bickerton, the lawyer of Lindani's widow, Lindsay Myeni.